What happens when two powerhouse hosts clash on live television over a topic that hits way too close to home? The air in the studio was thick with tension as Jeannie Mai sat across from Sherri, cameras rolling, audience buzzing with anticipation. What started as a friendly catch-up session quickly spiraled into one of the most uncomfortable moments in daytime television history. Before we get into exactly what went down, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling me whose side you're on in this situation, because trust me, you're going to have an opinion by the end of this video. The interview began like any other. Sherri welcomed Jeannie onto the stage with open arms, the two women hugging warmly as the audience applauded. They had known each other for years, both having carved out successful careers in entertainment. Both having been through very public personal struggles, the friendship seemed genuine, the kind that had weathered storms and come out stronger. Sherri started with the usual softballs, asking Jeannie about her latest projects, her fashion line, her life as a mother. Jeannie answered with her characteristic energy, laughing, gesturing wildly with her hands, telling stories that had the audience engaged and entertained. But then Sherri shifted gears. Her tone changed, became more serious, more probing. She leaned forward in her chair, her expression showing concern mixed with something else, something that looked almost like challenge. She brought up Jeannie's recent comments on a podcast about forgiveness and moving forward after divorce. The topic was loaded. Everyone knew it. Jeannie's divorce had been messy, public, filled with accusations and counter-accusations that had played out across social media and gossip columns for months. Sherri asked Jeannie to elaborate on what she meant when she said that some people use forgiveness as a weapon to avoid accountability. Jeannie's smile faded slightly. She took a breath, clearly choosing her words carefully. She explained that in her experience, there were people who demanded forgiveness without actually acknowledging the hurt they caused, who wanted to move past difficult situations without doing the real work of understanding why those situations happened in the first place. She spoke about emotional manipulation, about how some people twist the narrative to make themselves the victim when they were actually the one who caused the pain. The audience was quiet now, sensing that this was no longer just celebrity small talk. This was real. This was raw. Sherri nodded along, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she wasn't entirely on board with what Jeannie was saying. She interjected, her voice taking on a slightly defensive edge. She said that forgiveness was about freeing yourself, not about whether the other person deserved it or not. She talked about her own journey, her own divorce, how she had to forgive her ex-husband, not for him, but for herself, so she could move forward and not be consumed by bitterness. She said that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Jeannie's jaw tightened. She responded that she wasn't talking about holding on to anger. She was talking about people who use the language of forgiveness to gaslight others into accepting unacceptable behavior. She said that sometimes what people call forgiveness is actually just spiritual bypassing, avoiding the hard conversations, sweeping real issues under the rug in the name of being the bigger person. Her voice was steady, but there was an intensity to it now, a sharpness that hadn't been there before. She looked directly at Sherri and said that not everyone who asks for forgiveness has earned it, and that boundaries are just as important as grace. The audience shifted in their seats. A few people clapped tentatively, unsure if they should. Sherri's expression hardened. She sat back in her chair, crossing her arms, and said that it sounded like Jeannie was still holding on to a lot of pain, still letting her ex-husband have power over her emotions. She suggested that maybe Jeannie needed to do more work on herself before she could truly move forward. The words hung in the air like a slap. Jeannie's eyes widened, and for a moment she just stared at Sherri, processing what had just been said. Then Jeannie laughed, but it wasn't a genuine laugh. It was the kind of laugh that happens when you're shocked, when you can't believe what you just heard. She said that it was interesting how quickly Sherri had turned this into a critique of her healing journey. As if Sherri knew anything about what she had been through behind closed doors. She pointed out that Sherri had her own very public struggles, her own messy divorce, her own moments of pain that she had shared with the world. She asked Sherri why it was okay for her to process her trauma one way, but not okay for Jeannie to process hers differently. Sherri leaned forward again, her voice rising slightly. She said that she wasn't attacking Jeannie. She was trying to help her see that she was stuck, that she was letting her past define her present. She said that, as a friend, She felt obligated to tell Jeannie the truth, even if it was uncomfortable. She said that Jeannie was so focused on being right, on proving that she was the wronged party, that she couldn't see how her own actions might have contributed to the breakdown of her marriage. The audience gasped. This was no longer a friendly interview. This was a confrontation. Jeannie's face flushed. She uncrossed her legs and sat up straighter, her body language screaming defensiveness. She said that Sherri had no right to make assumptions about her marriage, about her choices, about her healing process. She said that just because Sherri had chosen to take the high road and forgive her, X didn't mean that was the right path for everyone. She said that sometimes taking the high road meant accepting less than you deserve, meant letting people off the hook for behavior that should have consequences. She said that she refused to participate in a culture that prioritized peace over justice, that asked women to be forgiving and gracious while men faced no real accountability for their actions. Sherri shook her head, her frustration evident. She said that Jeannie was making this about gender when it wasn't, that this was about personal growth and emotional maturity. She said that playing the victim might get sympathy from people online, but it wouldn't bring Jeannie real peace or real happiness. She said that at some point, Jeannie had to take responsibility for her own life, her own choices, her own happiness, and stop blaming her ex for everything that was wrong. She said that was what real healing looked like, not this performative anger disguised as empowerment. The tension was palpable now. Jeannie's hands were shaking slightly as she gripped the arms of her chair. She said that Sherri calling her anger performative was dismissive and condescending, that it was exactly the kind of thing people say to women when they want them to shut up and stop making noise. She said that she had every right to be angry about what happened to her, and that her anger didn't make her any less healed or any less mature. She said that maybe Sherri was uncomfortable with anger because she had never allowed herself to fully feel hers, that maybe Sherri had rushed to forgiveness because it was easier than sitting with the pain. Sherri's mouth dropped open. She looked genuinely hurt now, not just defensive. She said that Jeannie was crossing a line, that she was making this personal in a way that wasn't fair or warranted. She said that she had invited Jeannie onto her show as a friend to give her a platform to share her story. And this was how Jeannie repaid that kindness, by attacking her on her own show. She said that she didn't appreciate being psychoanalyzed by someone who clearly had unresolved issues of their own. She said that maybe this interview needed to end, that maybe they both needed to take a step back and cool off. Jeannie stood up abruptly. The audience let out a collective gasp. A few people even stood up as if something dramatic was about to happen. Jeannie said that Sherri was right about one thing. This interview did need to end. Jeannie stood abruptly, declaring she came expecting an honest dialogue between two women who'd been through similar struggles. Instead, she walked into an ambush therapy session she didn't sign up for, with someone who'd appointed themselves her judge and jury. Sherri remained seated, posture rigid with shock and anger. She told Jeannie to sit down, to stop being dramatic, to finish the conversation like an adult. The condescension was unmistakable, fueling Jeannie's resolve to leave. Jeannie shook her head deliberately. This dismissal of her feelings as dramatic was exactly the problem. She'd spent too many years being told her reactions were too much, her emotions excessive, that she needed to calm down and be reasonable. She was done shrinking herself to make others comfortable. Looking at the audience, many, watching with wide eyes, some nodding, others uncomfortable, she addressed them directly. What they were witnessing wasn't a breakdown, but a breakthrough, her standing up for herself in real time. Sherri stood, matching her energy. Jeannie was manipulating the audience, playing to cameras, making herself the hero when she was being disrespectful and ungrateful. This was Sherri's show, her platform, her space, and Jeannie was a guest. She had every right to ask tough questions. That's what good interviewers do. If Jeannie couldn't handle pushback, maybe she wasn't as healed as she thought. The production team scrambled. People in the wings gestured frantically, unsure whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. The energy had shifted from entertainment to genuine concern. Jeannie turned back, voice calm but firm. There was a difference between tough questions and judgments disguised as concern. Sherri didn't ask about her healing. She told her she wasn't healing correctly. Sherri didn't explore her perspectives. She dismissed it and replaced it with her own. Sherri threw up her hands in exasperation. Jeannie was twisting everything, looking for reasons to be offended. She'd been nothing but supportive throughout Jeannie's divorce. reaching out privately, defending her publicly when people were cruel online. She deserved better than this. When had Jeannie become so defensive, so unable to hear feedback, so quick to burn bridges with people who actually cared? Jeannie's eyes welled up, but she blinked back tears. Sherri bringing up their private conversations on camera was a violation. Another example of how this interview had been weaponized. Those conversations were supposed to be confidential, between friends, not fodder for public confrontation. She was starting to wonder if Sherri had ever really been her friend, or just been collecting information, waiting for the right moment to use it. The accusation landed hard on Sherri's face. Her voice dropped, quieter but more intense. Jeannie was being paranoid, projecting trust issues from her marriage onto their friendship. Not everyone had ulterior motives. Jeannie was so traumatized by betrayal, she was seeing it everywhere, even where it didn't exist. That was tragic, because she'd end up alone if she kept pushing away everyone who tried to get close. Jeannie stepped back, physically recoiling. Sherri, pretending to worry about her being alone, was rich considering Sherri was making her feel crazy for having boundaries. Gaslighting wasn't friendship, manipulation wasn't love, and critique disguised as concern wasn't support. Real friends don't publicly humiliate each other and call it tough love. Everything happening right now confirmed why she'd learned to be selective about who she trusted. The audience fell completely silent. Some had hands over mouths. Others filmed on phones, despite the no recording policy, capturing what was clearly going to be viral. Sherri looked around, seeming to remember suddenly this was all being broadcast. She tried to regain composure. Clearly, they both had strong feelings. Clearly, there were unresolved issues that needed to be addressed privately, not on television. But Jeannie wasn't letting her off easy. Sherri made this public, brought up sensitive topics on camera, pushed until Jeannie had no choice but to defend herself publicly. Sherri didn't get to start a fire and act surprised when everything burned. This was exactly what Sherri wanted: drama. Ratings. A moment that would get people talking. Sherri had sacrificed their friendship for content, and now had to live with that choice. Sherri's face crumpled. Jeannie was being cruel, saying things she'd regret. She reached out her hand in reconciliation, asking Jeannie to sit back down so they could talk properly. They were both better than this. Their friendship was stronger than one bad interview. People were watching. They had a responsibility to show conflict resolution, to demonstrate what mature women do when they disagree. Jeannie looked at the outstretched hand but didn't take it. Mature women also know when to walk away, when to recognize a toxic situation that needs to end. Not every conflict needed resolving on camera for the sake of teaching lessons. Sometimes the healthiest thing was removing yourself from environments that didn't serve you. And that's exactly what she was doing. She picked up her purse. The final exchange, Sherri's hand dropped. Her expression shifted from pleading to harder, more resigned. If Jeannie walked out now, she was proving every point Sherri made about being unable to handle conflict. Unwilling to do the hard work of maintaining relationships, walking away was easy. Staying and fighting was hard. Jeannie always talked about being strong and empowered, but the first moment things got uncomfortable, she was running. Where was the strength in that? The growth? Jeannie stopped. She turned back, and for a moment it looked like she might sit down. But then she spoke, words measured, deliberate, final. Sherri was confusing endurance with strength. Staying in situations that harm you isn't noble, it's self-destructive. She'd spent years learning the difference between quitting and choosing yourself, between giving up and setting boundaries. What Sherri called running, she called self-preservation. The real work wasn't staying in toxic dynamics to prove a point, it was recognizing them early enough to protect your peace. Sherri shook her head. Jeannie was using therapy language to justify bad behavior, to excuse that she couldn't handle being challenged. Everything was toxic to Jeannie now. Every disagreement was abuse. Every difficult conversation was trauma. Jeannie had become so fragile, so wrapped up in protecting herself from perceived threats, that she'd lost the ability to be in genuine relationship with anyone. Real friendship meant telling each other the truth, even when it hurt. She'd tried to be that friend today, and this was the response. Jeannie's voice rose, composure cracking. Sherri could call it whatever she wanted, frame it however made her feel better, but at the end of the day, Sherri had used her platform to attack someone under the guise of helping them. That was calculated, intentional, and no amount of reframing as tough love would change that. Sherri knew exactly what she was doing when she brought up those topics, pushed those buttons, made those accusations. Sherri wanted this reaction, this moment, this content. Congratulations, she got it. A producer stepped onto the stage, suggesting they take a break, regroup. Both women ignored him completely, too locked into their confrontation. This had become personal in a way that transcended the show, the cameras, the audience, everything. Sherri's voice shook. She never wanted this, genuinely thought she was helping, cared about Jeannie and wanted to see her happy. If she'd known Jeannie would take everything so personally, twist everything so negatively, she never would have brought it up. She was trying to have a real conversation, the kind they used to have before Jeannie became so guarded and suspicious. She missed the old Jeannie, the one who could laugh at herself, who didn't see enemies everywhere, who trusted her friends. Jeannie's eyes narrowed. The old Jeannie was naive, a people-pleaser who let others disrespect her because she was afraid of conflict. Sherri might miss that version because she was easier to control, easier to manage, easier to talk down to. The new Jeannie had boundaries, self-respect, standards for how she allowed people to treat her. If Sherri couldn't handle that evolution, if she preferred the doormat version, that said everything about Sherri and nothing about her. Growth isn't always comfortable for people around you, but that doesn't make it wrong. Sherri wiped at her eyes, trying to maintain dignity but clearly emotional. Jeannie was rewriting history, making her out to be a villain when she'd been nothing but supportive. She'd celebrated Jeannie's wins, cried with her during losses, been there through everything. One difficult conversation didn't erase years of friendship. Unless Jeannie wanted it to. Unless she was looking for an excuse to cut her off, like she'd cut off so many others. At some point, Jeannie had to look at the pattern if everyone in her life was letting her down. Maybe the common denominator was her. The audience audibly reacted to gasps and murmurs spreading. Even the producer stepped back, recognizing this had gone too far. Jeannie stood completely still, staring at Sherri with an expression hard to read. Then she smiled, but it was sad a smile that said she was done. She appreciated Sherri finally showing her true colors, saying what she really thought instead of hiding behind concern and friendship. Yes, she'd cut people off, ended relationships that no longer served her, and she wasn't ashamed. She'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who claimed to love her while tearing her down. She'd rather have no friends than fake ones who used intimacy as ammunition. This moment right here was why she'd become so selective. Sherri's hand dropped to her side. Her expression shifted from pleading to something harder, more resigned. She said that if Jeannie walked out right now, if she left in the middle of a taping without even trying to work through this, then she was proving every point Sherri had made about her being unable to handle conflict, being unwilling to do the hard work of maintaining relationships. She said that walking away was easy, staying and fighting for something was hard. She said that Jeannie always talked about being strong and empowered, but the first moment things got uncomfortable. She was running. She asked where the strength was in that, where the growth was in that. Jeannie stopped moving toward the exit. She turned back to face Sherri, and for a moment it looked like she might actually sit back down, might actually engage one more time. But then she spoke, and her words were measured, deliberate, final. She said that Sherri was confusing endurance with strength, that staying in situations that harm you isn't noble, it's self-destructive. She said that she had spent years learning the difference between quitting and choosing yourself, between giving up and setting boundaries. She said that what Sherri called running, she called self-preservation. She said that the real work wasn't staying in toxic dynamics to prove a point. It was recognizing them early enough to protect your peace. Sherri shook her head slowly. She said that Jeannie was using therapy language to justify bad behavior, to excuse the fact that she couldn't handle being challenged. She said that everything was toxic to Jeannie now. Every disagreement was abuse. Every difficult conversation was trauma. She said that Jeannie had become so fragile, so wrapped up in protecting herself from perceived threats, that she had lost the ability to be in genuine relationship with anyone. She said that real friendship meant being able to tell each other the truth, even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. She said that she had tried to be that friend to Jeannie today, and this was the response she got. Jeannie's voice rose now, the composure she had been maintaining starting to crack. She said that Sherri could call it whatever she wanted. Could frame it, however, made her feel better about what she had done, but at the end of the day, Sherri had used her platform to attack someone under the guise of helping them. She said that was calculated, that was intentional, and no amount of reframing it as tough love would change that fact. She said that Sherri knew exactly what she was doing when she brought up those topics, when she pushed those buttons, when she made those accusations. She said that Sherri wanted this reaction, wanted this moment, wanted this content, and congratulations, she got it. The audience was restless now. Some people were nodding along with Jeannie. Others were clearly on Sherri's side. And still others looked like they just wanted this whole thing to be over. A producer finally stepped onto the stage, trying to interject, trying to suggest that maybe they should take a break, regroup, figure out how to move forward. But both women ignored him completely, too locked into their confrontation to care about protocol or production schedules or anything else. This had become personal in a way that transcended the show, the cameras, the audience, everything. Sherri's voice was shaking now, whether from anger or hurt or both, it was hard to tell. She said that she never wanted this, that she genuinely thought she was helping, that she cared about Jeannie and wanted to see her happy. She said that if she had known Jeannie was going to take everything so personally, twist everything so negatively, she never would have brought it up. She said that she was trying to have a real conversation, the kind they used to have before Jeannie became so guarded and suspicious. She said that she missed the old Jeannie, the one who could laugh at herself, who didn't see enemies everywhere, who trusted her friends. Jeannie's eyes narrowed. She said that the old Jeannie was naive, was a people pleaser, was someone who let others disrespect her because she was so afraid of conflict. She said that Sherri might miss that version of her because that version was easier to control, easier to manage. She said that the new Jeannie had boundaries, had self-respect, had standards for how she allowed people to treat her. She said that if Sherri couldn't handle that evolution, if she preferred the doormat version that said everything about Sherri and nothing about her. She said that growth isn't always comfortable for the people around you, but that doesn't make it wrong. Sherri wiped at her eyes quickly, trying to maintain some dignity, but clearly emotional now. She said that Jeannie was rewriting history, making her out to be some villain when she had been nothing but supportive. She said that she had celebrated Jeannie's wins, had cried with her during her losses, had been there through everything. She said that one difficult conversation didn't erase years of friendship. Unless Jeannie wanted it to. Unless Jeannie was looking for an excuse to cut her off like she had cut off so many others. She said that, at some point, Jeannie had to look at the pattern. Had to see that if everyone in her life was letting her down, maybe the common denominator was her. The words landed like a bomb. The audience audibly reacted, gasps and murmurs spreading through the crowd. Even the producer who had been trying to intervene stepped back. Recognizing that this had gone too far, that there was no recovering from this moment, Jeannie stood completely still for a long moment, just staring at Sherri with an expression that was hard to read. Then she smiled, but it was a sad smile, a smile that said she was done, completely and utterly done. She said that she appreciated Sherri finally showing her true colors, finally saying what she really thought instead of hiding behind concern and friendship. She said that yes, she had cut people off, had ended relationships that no longer served her, and she wasn't ashamed of that. She said that she would rather be alone than surrounded by people who claimed to love her while tearing her down. She said that she would rather have no friends than fake ones who used intimacy as ammunition. She said that this moment right here, this exact conversation, was why she had become so selective, so careful, so boundaried. Because this is what people do when you're vulnerable with them. They use it against you the moment you disagree with them. Sherri opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. She looked exhausted suddenly, defeated, like all the fight had drained out of her. She glanced at the cameras, at the audience, at the producer, as if suddenly realizing the full scope of what had just happened. What would happen when this aired? How this would be dissected and debated and discussed for weeks or months to come. She said quietly that she was sorry that she never meant for things to go this way, that she valued Jeannie and their friendship more than she could express. But Jeannie was already walking away. She didn't respond to the apology, didn't acknowledge it at all. She walked past the producer, past the cameras, toward the stage exit with her head held high. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent, so they did a mixture of both. Some people clapping tentatively, while others sat in stunned silence. Sherri stood alone on the stage, watching Jeannie leave. And for the first time since the interview started, she had nothing to say. The cameras kept rolling, capturing every second of the aftermath, the awkward silence, the shocked faces, the undeniable reality that something significant had just broken. As Jeannie reached the exit, she paused for just a second. She didn't turn around, didn't look back at Sherri, but she said one final thing, loud enough for everyone to hear. She said that she hoped this taught people watching that it was okay to leave, okay to walk away, okay to choose yourself, even when everyone else wanted you to stay and endure. She said that your peace was more valuable than anyone's perception of you, and that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was simply refuse to participate in your own diminishment. Then she pushed through the door and was gone. The studio erupted then, some people applauding loudly, others talking amongst themselves, everyone processing what they had just witnessed. Sherri stood there for another moment before finally addressing her audience, her voice shaky, but trying to maintain professionalism. She said that they would need to go to commercial, that clearly this interview had taken an unexpected turn, that she hoped people at home understood that real conversations are messy and complicated. But even as she said it, you could see on her face that she knew this was bigger than just a messy interview, that this was a friendship ending in real time, on camera, in front of millions. So there you have it, one of the most intense moments in daytime television, a conversation that spiraled completely out of control. Two friends becoming something else entirely right before our eyes. Make sure to subscribe to stay updated on all the latest entertainment drama. And drop a comment below telling me, do you think Jeannie was right to walk off? Or should she have stayed and tried to work it out with Sherri?